So now let's take a look at transpose. Transpose is located here at the top of your screen. It's the move, scale, and rotate tools, and you'll recognize this transpose line that comes along with them. Transpose is a brush that you can actually select if you go in the brush menu, T for transpose, it's right there. The hotkey it's assigned is the letter R. Typically, if I want to access transpose, though, I use W for move, E for scale, or R for rotate. Transpose has a few different functions. The most commonly used function of transpose is to move subtools in relation to each other. So if I transpose move the eyeballs, I can move them away from the subtools of the body and the teeth. If I were to come in here and grab the teeth subtools, I can use transpose to move them deeper into the skull. I could bring them up. I could rotate them. Transpose is essentially used to move subtools in relation to one another, as opposed to trying to do that with the move brush moves faces. So if you try and move, a very large subtool using just the move brush, it will distort because there's a fall off on that brush. Whereas the move transpose tool is going to grab the entire subtool. As you can see here, the move brush has a fall off. It's going to move polygons. So we've used transpose when we've put eyeballs into characters. We've used it when we're positioning subtools around. It's really just a matter of selecting the subtool that we want to move, and then pressing W for move, and then drawing a new transpose line. The transpose line, and this goes for move, scale, and rotate, is composed of 3 different orange circles. A white circle, which will restore the angle of the line. It will recenter the transpose line. If I click the outer circle, when I'm in move mode, it will shear the object. Let's go ahead and turn on solo so we can actually see what's happening here. If I click on the inner circle, it will trim the object. This actually comes in quite handy when we're doing hard surface modeling. I can grab the outermost circle here and I can trim an object to a flat plane, just like so. If I want to move something, I use the center circle. That just moves the entire object. Transpose move is the only one where you're going to always use the center circle. Now, if I wanted to transpose rotate, let's select the teeth. I would go to transpose rotate. I would click the point that I wanted to rotate around and then drag my line out. I always draw a new transpose line each time I'm going to rotate, scale, or move something. I will click the outermost circle here and drag, and it will rotate around the center of the other opposite point. You can see here I'm rotating around that point. If I were scaling, it would do the exact same thing. It would scale around that point. So this is my handle for my modifier. That's the center of my effect. Now, if I want to lock my line into a certain axis, I'll click one of these green, blue, or red crosshairs, and that basically just snaps my transpose line to that axis. So it's pretty cut and dry to move subtools around using transpose. Just click the center circle for move, or pick the center of your effect if you're going to scale or rotate, and then click the outermost circle to scale and rotate. Now, a second thing that's available with transpose, which a lot of people are unaware of, I'm going to select the subtool for the body here. I'm going to click and drag a transpose line. And if I want to move and scale a transpose line to actually change its size, I'll just click the outermost circles and I can move them around. If I want to move the transpose line itself, I'll click the innermost circle. Don't click inside it, just click on the circle. What I'm trying to do, and I'm going to turn off my X symmetry so I just have one line here, is I want to draw a transpose line that goes from the chin to the top of the head. Now if you look here, the transpose line has a number of units assigned to it. Right now it's 8.1 units. I want to change that. I'm going to go to my Preferences menu, and I will go to Transpose Units, and I will set my calibration distance to 1. And I will set my unit name to heads. So look what we have now. We have this measurement right here is 1 heads. So if I zoom out and then I grab the outermost or the lower circle and then drag that down to the bottom of the feet, I can get a proportional measurement. Here we can see I've got just about 8 heads. 8 heads are really nice. Actually, that's really, really close. There we go, 8 heads tall. That is a really good heroic proportion, 8 heads high. So this allows me to take proportional measurements off my model. So if I want to see, okay, well, I want the midpoint of my model to fall about at the pubic bone, I can take my transpose line, draw it from the pubic bone to the top of the head, and then make sure I've got 4 heads. It's 3.9 heads. It's really, really close. So that's a good point for the pubic bone. So this allows me to take comparative measurements on my model to see what the proportions are. I can do this on the face as well. If I want to find the center of the face, I can easily use this transpose line to measure that. If I want to measure the distance from the center of the nose to the outermost point of the ear, I can do that and take comparative measurements to check my proportions, to check my figure. So that's actually a really, really useful way of using the transpose line, which is not very well known. Now, the other most common use of the transpose line is for posing. So when we're not using it as a measuring tool, and when we're not using it to move subtools in relation to each other, we can use transpose to actually pose our model. So let's take a look at how we can do that now. So if I wanted to pose this character, I would come up here to the tool menu. And let's step down our subdivision levels, because it's actually quite hard to pose a character with a whole bunch of subdivisions. So we'll step down to about level 3 in this case. And what I would like to do is I would like to bend the knee. So I'm going to transpose mask the mesh. That means while I'm in transpose, rotate, scale, or move mode, hold the control key down and then click and drag. And it will start to mask the model based on the underlying topology. So I can control, click, and drag, and then it will automatically mask down to the leg. I can fix any areas that are a problem, and then control click to feather the edge. Now, if I want to bend the leg, I will draw a transpose line from the great trochanter of the femur, sort of the rotational point of the hip there, down to the ankle, and then I can click and drag, and that will bend that leg. I can move that transpose line in so it's sitting actually where the rotational point of the leg will be. Like that. Now let's say I want to bend the knee. Now I could mask down to the knee and then do the exact same thing, draw a line from the knee joint down to the ankle and then bend, but look at how that sort of compresses the leg in a strange way. Transpose has something built in called bone posing. If I draw a transpose line that ends at the knee joint, and this only works for hinge joints like fingers and knees and elbows, things like that. If I draw my transpose line so it ends at the point I want to rotate, then hold down the Alt key and click inside that circle, you see we get a nice stretch at the knee and a compression at the back of the knee. So here, let's take a look at that again. I'll just unmask a little bit more of that leg. Draw a transpose line down to the knee. I'll use the click on the circle to pull that transpose line inside the leg. I will click while holding the Alt key and drag that outer or that end circle, and it will bend the knee, compressing the back of the thigh and stretching the front of the knee. This works quite well for things like ankles as well. You see I can bend that ankle, just Alt clicking and dragging. If I want to take this leg, rotate this. Now if I want to rotate the whole upper or lower body, I can mask down to the hips, and then I can rotate the lower body. Make sure that I've got everything masked that I need masked. I find it very helpful to feather the masks when I'm transposing. If I want to bend the torso, I can do that. Oops, make sure I'm in rotate mode. Now, if I wanted to bend the arms, I would transpose rotate, or transpose mask, excuse me, up to the shoulder. I would probably manually come in here and fix up my mask a little bit, then feather the edges, and then I could take my transpose line and I could either end it right there at the shoulder and rotate like that, or I could rotate like this. I find rotating the shoulder girdle usually requires a bit of finesse and a few different techniques, because so much is happening here. When you raise your arm, it's raising from this point here, it's raising here, it's also taking the whole clavicle as scapula, the scapula being back here, and actually rotating that area as well, the whole shoulder girdle. So it's important to kind of be aware of that when you're trying to bend an arm. So then if I want to bend at the elbow, remember I can draw my transpose line. I'll step up a subdivision level so I get a little bit more geometry to work with. I'll take my transpose line, draw it down the arm, just position it so that circle is sitting in the elbow, and then I will Alt-click to bend that elbow forward. See the effect that has. Now if I want to pronate and supinate the forearm, that means rotate your forearm around. What I would do is I would draw a transpose line from the elbow and then carry it well off, well far away like this. Then I would go to transpose rotate, and I would hold the Alt key and then rotate the center circle, and that allows me to supinate and pronate the forearm. You see that? See how it rotates that forearm? Then if I want to bend the wrist, I'll use my bone posing by holding down the Alt key and bending the wrist. Fingers, again, I will use bone posing for, so I will mask down, let's say, the index finger, invert that mask, and then I'll just use my manually painting of masks here just to make sure I've got everything the way I want it. Transpose rotate, and then I will use bone posing by Alt-clicking and dragging that outer circle to extend the finger. If I need to bend a finger, I will do the same. I will just draw my transpose line, and then I will use Alt-click-drag to bend the finger. Same here for this joint there. Draw a new transpose line, and then Alt-click. Now, anytime you do this, you're going to need to do a little bit of resculpting. Like here, I would probably want to come in with the inflate brush and just pucker those bits together, just so it feels like skin compressing there. So you will need to do a bit of resculpting, but it's incredibly fast compared to trying to go into Maya and build a rig to do this posing. Alt, click and drag for that joint there. Oops, make sure I'm on rotate. Alt, click and drag. And I can draw another one and Alt, click, drag. If I want to extend, I'll just extend it out with Alt, click, drag. Bring that point there and Alt, click, drag. Now, you might be thinking, how can I pose this body when it's got teeth and eyes? How do I pose multiple subtools? Well, luckily, there is a plugin that allows you to do this. What it will do is it'll step down to your lowest subdivision level on all of your subtools and then bake them together into a posable model. So in this case, my lowest subdivision level is a bit too low. So I'm going to step up to about level 2 and then delete my lower subdivisions, just so I've got a model that's got a little bit more geometry that I can pose with. Then I will go to Z plugin. Actually, oops, step down. I'll go to Z plugin, Transpose Master, and let's tear this off so we can see it. Transpose Master has several buttons. There's T-Pose Mesh and then T-Pose to Sub-T. T-Pose Mesh will take all of my subtools and collapse them down into what's called a T-Pose Mesh. It is a model with one subdivision level which I can then pose. T-Pose to Subtools will then take all of those subtools that I posed as that one T-Pose mesh and then transfer the model positions back over to their individual subtools. Now, it is also possible to use Z-Sphere rigs in this. You can also store your Transpose Master rig, and you can paste a Transpose Master rig, so you can basically copy and paste Z-Sphere's rigs across Transpose Master files. You can also use layers. So if you turn on layers, each subtool will get its own layer that contains the pose in it. And that'll be more clear once we talk about layers in a different lesson. But if you want to store a layer that's got the pose on there so you could then turn it off and have your model return to its original positioning, you can turn that button on. So let's go ahead and see how this works. The first button we press is T-Pose Mesh. It takes all of our tools and then collapses them down into a single posable model. So let's go ahead and transpose rotate the torso. Let's give this guy a nice twist. So we'll go ahead and go to rotate. Oops. And let's rotate the torso. Maybe give it a little bit of a bend. And let's mask up to the neck here. And oops. I need to make sure that I don't have anything masked there that I don't want. There we go. Do our transpose rotate again. Rotate around that center point. Then we'll mask up to the neck. There we go. And we'll draw another transpose line from here. Now I can move the head, and you'll notice the eyes and the teeth are masked, so I'm going to unmask those so they move as I pose the model here. So let's bring that line there. Now if I click that point and move it, I can move the head and the teeth and eyes follow. You see there's actually a couple points in there that I missed, so I just need to make sure that I've got all of that unmasked. And let's move that head that way. Let's run the mask up to the base of the skull. There we go. Let's make sure that this is unmasked. And let's move the head like this. And if we run the transpose line right down the z-axis of the head like this, and we click the center circle, we can kind of bend the head, rotate the head a little bit like that. So that's a pretty creepy looking pose there. Looks like he's maybe singing a song or at a rock concert. Let's go ahead now and transpose that pose back over. What I will do is I will click T-Pose to sub-T. That takes the position of the model, the body, the teeth, and the eyes, and transfers them back over their individual subtools. So if I click that, you see it moves each individual subtool back. So I can now step up my subdivision levels on my model, and the head, eyes, and teeth have all followed along with that pose. And I can continue to tweak the sculpture here using my move brush. So transpose is extremely powerful for posing our characters and giving them a really dynamic, interesting posture. There's only so much you can do with a T-pose, and transpose allows us to create dynamic poses for our characters, have them interacting with their environment and their props and each other. Even if you are doing a character that's standing in a neutral position, it's really nice to use transpose to give it a little bit more gesture, a little bit of a sense of it being relaxed into that pose, so it's not quite so stiff. So that is how we use transpose in ZBrush.